Okay, so the saw is currently under construction. I was going to cut some stuff this week, and the switch that was in the box that would sit right here stopped working. The flip wouldn't turn it off. And so I was running it, just unplugging it for a little while. But I went to replace the switch, and this is the switch that was in there. It was, sitting in, and there was the open slot was on the side where the lever flipped back and forth to turn it off. So I just moved a pin inside here to turn the switch on and off. Taking it out, it broke. So this had places to screw the wiring down on both sides. And so I went out on a mission to replace the switch, right? So let's see if we can get it in focus here. Made in the USA. So this switch, I didn't know how old it was, but I went, first of all, I headed to the hardware store, and they said, oh, we don't have anything like that. And they said, try Grover's Electrical. So went and checked them out, local business that does a lot of electrical kind of in the region. And yeah, they looked at it and said even quicker they didn't have anything like that, and sent us down to a machine and tool company that also does repair. And so gave him the switch, and he went and looked for some similar things, but he has a whole repair shop and couldn't find anything that was the same. He estimated this came from the 40s. So this saw was a do-it-yourself kit, and I didn't know how old, but I figured it had to be multiple decades old. I thought maybe 70s or something, but I didn't. Based on this part here, unless it was just inventory sitting around when they built it, it may go back to like the 40s or 50s when they put this kit together. So I'm gonna show you around the saw just a little bit. We'll get some light, and we'll talk about how the different parts of this work. So, but actually, I guess first though, to put a coda on the switch story. So I went off and looked for something that would just be able to be wired in, that would just turn the power on and off. That's all really needed. So I was going to try this one you see sitting here, just a basic light switch that could drill a hole in the post and kind of maybe glue something to extend it, get a little more leverage, and let the same function that pin you see there kind of gets pulled through when the saw is done, when the chain pulls all the way out, and it was going to just flick this switch and turn everything off. But the wiring on the one we got isn't the same, and we're going to need to do just a little more looking, but I'm not able to right this day, so it's still off in the future a little bit. Okay, but I said I'd show you around the saw. So this box that sits here, if you rotate it 180 degrees, it's bolted on the outside of the tub right here, and there's a little hole where that wire comes through. That wire is attached on the back side. There's kind of a little shaped piece of metal over the top to kind of keep the spray out from running through. The bolts on the back side, those are all kind of siliconed into the tub to keep leaks away. And you've got a carriage in here with a vise on it, right? So you got a screw right here down the center of the vise, that this wheel that you're looking at right there, that kind of L-shaped wheel, that runs the vise in and out. It's about 8 inches of travel, so that's about as big a piece as I can fit side to side is 8 inches, which matches the saw. It's a 16-inch blade, so that gives you about 8 inches of cut. And that is this screw up here that runs the vise. There's a couple of long beams that the carriage runs on. You can see they're bolted onto the back of the tub or down at that end, and they're bolted onto the tub down here at this end with a little extra piece of metal across there for strength. The carriage is cut out and runs down those, and there's a drive screw, which is this screw back here that's kind of covered in mud, coming out of that kind of splash protected spot there at the back where it goes out to the motor. So that runs the length of the carriage, and that drives the carriage down the cutting blade and moves the rock through the saw. So over on this other side here, there's this tray. It's got, rock debris and kind of mud in there, but this tray is just to catch the rock and the bits and pieces so they don't fall down into the saw. So that is on this side. And over here, you've just got a little housing for the motor to come through. So this drives the saw blade. Like I say, this is a 16-inch blade. It's a diamond blade, and it's not sharp for your finger, or it's not going to cut wood, but it has these little cutting diamonds kind of glued and encrusted into the side of the blade. And so on both sides, you've got those, and they do the cutting. They kind of feel rough as you run your finger across them that way. And so you got that diamond blade out to the motor. Got that's just the wheel with the belt-driven saw spinning. There should be a little protection cage around that, but that one does look like 40s vintage, kind of like just open bent metal in a cage. So actually, I should have thought this thing was older just based on that, but it wasn't bolted on, and it's it's not ready to be put back on yet, so it's just open right now. Nobody with long hair should stand next to the saw or loose clothing. So at the back here, this is I gotta get my cord around, so sorry, I'm gonna show you the floor for a second. All right, so back here you got the motor powering the drive to the saw blade, and you've got that, and that other motor right there is the motor that runs the drive chain, or that screw, that long screw that runs the carriage and moves the saw, or moves the rocks through the saw as the carriage goes by the blade. And that one, I'll show you from the other side, that actually has a little spring-loaded spot where if the saw encounters something that is a spot that's harder than normal, it will actually flex and twist in, and then this belt will slip and stop this, so the belt can keep moving, but it takes the tension off so that this wheel that drives the screw can either move slower or just completely stop and not gum up your saw because there's a hard spot in the rock, or the density changes, and you need the blade to not just try to power through and either screw up your blade or make it dull quicker than it should be. So let's go peek at that from the opposite side here. While we're walking back around to the other side, this wheel right here, this one is on the carriage we didn't talk about, that runs the carriage back and forth. So if you're making slabs, or you're just needing to position whatever you're cutting, you spin this wheel, and the whole carriage, the whole vise, travels back away from the blade, so you can position it. You can see this whole carriage. It's that's the screw. This post and this post down here are where the vise slides in and out from the blade. So that's kind of a part of the setup as well. You can see there's some space drilled through the mounts there for that screw to travel and attach on the back side down under here. That just sits through on that side. Okay, we were on our way over to look at the back side over here though. I sort of just started making this video and didn't have the saw pulled out, and so I've got trouble getting access back here. Let me see if I can find the little spot I was trying to show you with the camera. I'm just reaching back around here. That is something that you can see on camera that I can't see at the moment. I was trying to find you that spring-loaded area. The wiring, that front shutoff is where the power comes in, and it just runs through the switch I was showing you at the front, and then travels through the cord here and hits this box first. And I'm not an electrician, and so I can't. Yeah, that looks like an old cord. I hadn't gotten back and looked close, but once I'm seeing that plug, that does look like 30s, 40s kind of stuff. Anyway, so the power comes in back here, powers this first little motor that runs the carriage, and then it leaves again and goes over to the main motor that's running the saw blade. All right, I'm going to go back around. Maybe I'll even slide this thing out a bit, get a better peek in here. All right, and then down in the tub itself, there's about 5 gallons of mineral oil, just 100% mineral oil. If you notice down here, this I'll show you before I get back around to the back. If you notice, the blade sits down in there, and it's maybe hard to tell on camera, but the blade is in the mineral oil, and you can kind of see through the surface and see that there's sediment down at the base. So as long as the blade's not touching the sediment, it doesn't kick up all that muck and dirt. But if all the debris and the stuff you've grinded off the rocks, once that builds up on the bottom to where the point where the saw touches it, then you're spraying that all over as you cut. And so then it's time to do what I did in that other video and scoop out all that muck. And if you want to save the oil, you filter it, and you got to make sure that blade though is always touching the oil, so that when it comes up coated in oil, and then that both cools and lubricates, so it dissipates heat. That oil will warm up as you're cutting for a while, and so it keeps from one of the biggest things is if this gets too warm, the way that they attach the diamond bits, I think some of it's an adhesive, and if it gets too warm, it will just come right off. And so you don't want to have to go get a new blade because you let it overheat. And there's other reasons. You don't want it to heat up too much. So the oil dissipates all of that heat and also lubricates. And it's not conductive. Mineral oil is not a conductor, and so with the power stuff coming into it, you don't have to worry about what could happen. All right, maybe you could see this before, but I was holding the camera back here and I couldn't really show it. So basically, if this thing ends up jamming, then this spring can get pulled open, and that releases, sorry, I'm turning you up sideways. It's a tight fit back here. That would release pressure here, which lets it slip on this wheel. And if it's slipping on this wheel, then the carriage isn't moving forward during the time it's slipping. And so if it's binding, that will flex in as much as needed to let this slip, and you end up not driving through that rough part of the rock or harder, denser part of the rock as fast, and it lets the blade keep cutting at a safe speed for the blade to not get damaged. All right, well then, you got the hood and the tub. It's just a big tub. It's all caulked up and welded in some places in this case, but it's welded down the edges here, and then any place where bolts have gone through, you've got caulk and everything. Another comment here, you can see based on kind of the wiring and some of the stuff that's in here at the back, some of this has been upgraded a little. I don't know every part that was upgraded. I got it from a guy who had been a rockhound probably his whole life. He told me his dad is almost 100 years old, and he's still cutting rocks and has a bunch of saws and equipment. And so the man I bought this from explained that he had done some modifications. He had machined some of this, so you can tell this looks much more modern than what was kind of maybe the more vintage parts here. So he increased the diameter on this to drive it a little slower, so that it would move the carriage through a little slower. He wanted it to be more gentle on the blade. So that's kind of a modification. He had a machine shop and did some of that work himself. And you can kind of see this stuff back here. That's definitely not the same kind of motor as this one sitting on the end. And this one here on the end, just to give you a little bit better picture of some of the hardware, it's kind of bolted together. You could do a different design if you were trying to put one of these together for yourself and you were wanting to do it on the cheap and build it yourself and had those abilities. It just gives you a picture of kind of how that's all put together. And then you got the hood, and got the big hood that drops down over. So in the hood, they've just bolted in some clear space to be able to see what you're cutting. Goop it all up with some silicone. So just some little pieces that are bolted down. This whole thing has a little arm here that's attached that has a little catch. So you just put it in the post, pop that little joint free, and then it all seals up. That's kind of what the lip looks like. Seals it all in, and everywhere there's something bolted to the tub that's all siliconed up like it needs to be. And it's actually a pretty short tub. It's just sitting up on a stand.